Welcome to Before the Goal. This is a series where I take a look at and review a game that I'm playing before I've actually finished it. Of course, this might be easier to title as initial thoughts, however, these opinions come after having spent time with the game and having general constructed thoughts about it, but not a 100% conclusive opinion on it. Now, I may come back to a game that I'm looking at in Before the Goal, or I might not if my opinions really don't change from what I've already said. And with so many games in my library, especially some that I still haven't even touched, I want to at least share my thoughts on what I'm playing, even if I haven't fully completed it. So with that being said, today's game we're looking at is RAZED, developed by Warpfish and published by PQube, who graced me with a review code through Keymailer, which was actually a few months ago, like in September. If you're a YouTuber yourself and you review video games, I think this is one of the ways that you can gain access to review copies of some pretty great titles, especially of some titles that have already released in the past. Warpfish is a development team that consists of just John Thompson and John Ferriman, so just a nice shout out to indie developers because we all know they really need the love. Anyways, let's give a little background on RAZED. This game has been around for quite a few years. It was originally developed as Outcry, a smaller prototype. As stated by the website, Outcry was an ambient 3D racing game made in Unity, created in June 2014. In Outcry, you must race against the clock through a bleak urban environment in order to gather enough people in order to prevent disaster. Most of the population aren't sympathetic to your cause, but those that are will give you quite the boost when you find them. The ultimate aim of the game is to complete each level in the fastest time possible. The game keeps track of your times and allows you to submit your best ones to the Outcry online leaderboard. Sadly, I haven't found any footage of that original prototype. However, through Warpfish's blog, there are some development statements and ideas that I will address later. RAZED tells the story of the player being held captive by the antagonist, or at least who I know the antagonist is right now, named the Developer. I think this is meant to be the developers of the game, but it's just one guy in this ship. In a fit of disappointment in the world that he has created, which is also the player's home, he wants to erase it. However, we're told that the player's constant protesting is making him feel terrible. Does it really look like I can do much while in this cage? What protesting have I done? Either way, giving us a chance, he gives us two talking exploding super shoes, Righty and Lefty. These are basically our companions throughout our journey. Lefty is actually like the navigator of our journey, whereas Righty just wants to blow shit up. Specifically you, because in order to stay alive, you've got to keep running. And here is where we get into the gameplay. The ring around the player is a charge display, and when you don't move after you've already started the level, it will empty. Once it empties completely, you will be erased, completely obliterated, and you have to start the level all over. So you just got to keep running in order to keep your shoes from killing you. And of course, don't fall off the level either, that will kill you as well. By the way, this also includes being in the air and jumping. Although the movement from jumping has an effect on you, you're technically not running on anything. And basically from this introduction, although the premise isn't fully explained of why you're here in this situation, I'm assuming the point is to stop the developer and basically escape erasure. There are several worlds you'll run through, each with several courses in them. Each world has a special ability tied to it. In World 1, most levels will basically consist of you using your ability to jump. World 2 also expands on that and introduces the drift mechanic. The gameplay itself is pretty simple. The learning curve isn't really much of an issue. In fact, the game is very fun when it works. With a game concept like this and also dealing with parkour, expect to die a lot. Your deaths will serve as a lesson as to what you should do on your next run. However, there are too many times where it feels like my death wasn't exactly my fault. First off, not all of the terrain on the stages makes sense. I understand that that statement is weird, but let me explain because this is an issue that is common on World 2. In this world, you'll notice that there is more of a construction aesthetic to the world and terrain in some areas. In order for the terrain that you'll be traveling on to logically be held up in some instances, it's held up by other bars and beams. The thing is that it's very easy for some of the pieces that are holding the terrain up can actually interfere with your run or landings. In fact, I found myself constantly getting stuck on the edges of surfaces, most notably the goal platform. You have no idea how frustrating it is to complete a challenging level and then get stuck on the goal itself. And an even worse example would be on the very first level once you've gotten the jump ability. There is some kind of shortcut you can take, and maybe I don't actually have the right ability to be taking this shortcut yet, but clearly this is some kind of intended path as these bits that refill your life gauge are placed on the path. So why does the terrain that leads to the path seem so difficult for the player to go through? It's almost as if the game is treating the surface like I'm trying to run up a wall, but the thing is that it's clearly not a wall, just a different type of ground. In addition, I'm pretty sure I've also found a glitch on one of the second world levels. Normally when you fall off the stage, you'll hit a part of the pit or the void where it will kill you. However, close to the end of this level that's on screen, you'll just keep falling until your life gauge runs out. I get that I would have died anyways, but having to wait to die is even more annoying than dying. Another issue I have with the game is that environmental hazards or levels where parts of the level itself tend to move cause the screen to shake or sometimes cause the game to slow down. Now on a TV this might be less of an issue. However, with me playing the Switch version, the shaking of the screen actually tends to hurt my eyes whenever I play in handheld mode. RAZED is the bastard offspring of a 3D platformer and a racing game. Fairly late in the process of nailing down the gameplay, and after much Mario Kart, we decided a drift mechanic was a must, and our initial implementation was heavily inspired by the aforementioned Plumber's Racer. Risk Reward are words branded around a lot in game design for good reason. Drifting, which was difficult to control, the risk, built up a speed boost that was triggered when the drift button was released, the reward. However, it really didn't feel right for RAZED. It was so overpowered that we couldn't predict where a player might end up, and outside of dropping invisible walls everywhere, we had to make a change. Our solution was to reverse the risk reward. We drastically reduced the difficulty for performing a drift and gave the player tighter turning reward. But now performing the drift fills a gauge which causes the player to explode when full, risk. Once the player stops drifting, the gauge slowly empties. Now although some parts of the way it's worded is pretty confusing, here's what I think they meant. In Mario Kart, as you hold the drift, your control becomes a bit more difficult, but the reward you gain after letting go is a speed boost, and it is a pretty hefty reward. The developers wanted to change this common drift concept for Mario Kart and implemented it into RAZED, so when you drift, the control is easier, but doing it actually acts as if you're not running, thus causing your meter to slowly run out. The thing is, I find that some places where you're suggested to drift can actually be pretty done without drifting at all, or that World 2 doesn't give you enough instances where you would need to use the drift. Now there are some places where the drift mechanic is integrated amazingly in a very fun way, but there are still more places where it feels useless, or the level design that is meant to accompany the usage of the drift mechanic is a bit too tight. In fact, drifting barely takes much from your life gauge, so the risk from doing it doesn't really feel like much. But I don't think the level design in this initial world, where this ability is introduced, does the ability enough justice as to why it is a useful ability in your arsenal. And that's where I think RAZED, so far, tends to stumble. The design of the game isn't consistent. The game is fun, does a lot of things right, but it definitely has some issues, and sadly these issues tend to make the game pretty frustrating in a game that is already meant to be a bit of a challenge. The game looks amazing, in fact that's what drew me towards it in the first place. I love the contrast of colors to make certain worlds or set pieces stand out, and the music as done by Aldon Baker is very catchy. Maybe RAZED isn't the right game for me, even though I can still have some fun with it. I definitely think a lot of people will have a lot of fun with RAZED, even with all the issues that I see. Hey, some of these problems may not even be an issue for others. And you know what? Maybe my stance on RAZED will change once I've gotten past the boss that is giving me so much trouble. But as of right now, I have other games to get to, and I can't spend too much time with RAZED until after I give the much required attention to these other titles in my backlog. This has been an episode, in fact the first episode of Before the Goal, and I hope you'd enjoyed it. If you liked this video, share your thoughts about RAZED or your critiques on this video in the comments below. In addition, check out more of my other videos and subscribe for more content focused on gaming, art, and whatever else that erupts from my mind. Talk to you guys later.